Hello and welcome everybody to this week's edition of the LFC Transfer Room. We are joined by our two other co-hosts, which is Richie, who is a writer for Liverpool LFC Transfer Room, and our main man on the YouTube channel, Mr. YouTube Extraordinaire, is Matty. Taking you off,
kind.
lads.
Very kind.
And before I forget my own name, I'm Daz. I'm the producer and co-host for a podcast called The Liverpool Connection, but I also host this show, LFC Transfer Room. And today we will be discussing some movements of the current transfer window and news and links surrounding Liverpool Football Club. But today we've got an added bonus because we have a special guest, former journalist from the Liverpool Echo. It's Mr. Dan Kay.
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you. Thanks for having me on.
It's good to have you on, mate.
Yeah, it's fantastic to have you on.
Yeah,
Very
absolute pleasure.
Yeah,
I think the listeners are all happy as well because it's not just us three talking.
Yeah.
Mixed up a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, we have faces for radio.
That's my whole line.
Well, we're hoping to pick your brain today, so we're going to talk.
That won't take long.
A Great British Bake Off. And go.
Sounds good.
No. We're going to talk about some transfers that have been out and about, and I will give it to Richie and Matty.
Okay, yeah, so thank you for that. First things first, let's go ahead and give you guys your weekly segment of transfer headlines. So, are you all ready? Let's get started. The first one, obviously, the biggest news is that Wijnaldum is set to join PSG after the French side offered more than double what Barcelona did right at the last minute, according to Fabrizio Romano. And Gini is expected to sign a contract until 2024, snubbing Barcelona, which is always such a shame, hey?
And Gianluigi Longoria, an Italian reporter for Channel Sport Italia, is saying that Liverpool read the race for Rafinha, but they're yet to make a formal inquiry. While on the other end, outlet Leeds Live say Rafinha is not available at any price, and it will take an astronomical offer for us to get him, basically, from Leeds.
Yeah, and the Zambian coach, Milutin Sredovic, has said that Patson Daka is not in his current Zambian squad because he is sorting out his future for next season. So where he is off to, we think we might have a little idea that we'll explore a little bit later. Hopefully it's in the red shirt of Liverpool.
And reliable Belgian journalist Sven Klaas claims that Liverpool are interested in signing Yuri Tielemans, and that the Belgian midfielder was stalled on a new contract with Leicester after the Reds have declared their interest in him. I think Champions League football might be the one that's swaying him in this one.
Absolutely. The Daily Mail have also claimed that Kelleher is set to go on loan this summer. Obviously, Liverpool's reserve goalkeeper we actually spoke about last week, and we said how impressed he was in every performance, really. While Mark Ogden of ESPN says that Adrian is likely to leave Liverpool this summer.
And in the same report, Mark Ogden reported that Liverpool have only got 50 million to spend this summer unless they can sell some players to raise more funds. It's not clear from the report if this figures included the finalised from Ibrahima Konate for 35 million or if that is to come out of the 50 as well.
And then various sources really around the world. The AFCON 2020 may be cancelled. Unfortunately, there's civil war at the moment, and the COVID-19 situation in Cameroon has already made the draw untenable, and they have suspended it. And there are actually discussions that the AFCON may be suspended, which will obviously impact Liverpool and all of our African players. So that is our transfer roundup. And for more information on these stories, please do head to our website. Lads, anything in there really that take your interest? I mean, for me, there's a Patson Daka link. I'm just all of my head said he's going to Leipzig because it makes absolute sense, you know, with the Red Bull connection. I'd just love to see him at Liverpool, and for 25 million that's been rumoured, I just think that's a snip for a forward as good, as fast, as pressing as Patson Daka.
Would you put money down, Rich?
I might have put a few pounds into a Paddy Power account, yeah.
I think it's only Daka for me as well, to be honest. I mean, it'll be interesting to see if that £50 million one does have to take Canarsie out fix. If that's the case, then we're nearly spent up, which is mad because where's the funds gone from winning the Champions League and the Premier League?
But I mean, where do these people find this like 50 million? I mean, are they part of FSG that? Because that's a question, Dan. I want to ask you as well. Basically, is how does the when you worked for the Echo, how did that work? Your sources.
Well, I mean, I have to make it clear from the outset, I was never directly on the front line of reporting. I think in terms of the people that are brought into we most of us on this senior team certainly would have contact with the club's press officer, and on occasions we would try to stand things up for them. It's really only the kind of the main club correspondence that would be brought into the kind of the inner loop like that. But even then, I think only to a very, very limited extent. I think probably go on to this slightly further later on, but the whole landscape has changed in the last until maybe 15, 20 years ago. The clubs needed the papers more than the other way around. We were basically their voice between themselves and the supporters. Obviously now they've got their own media operations themselves, websites, TV channels, radio stations. So in many ways they're competing. So I think they only release a far more limited extent of information in terms of what they used to. But a lot of it is, they'll tell us what they want us to put out, and there will always be a certain element of kind of politics and really PR involved. But long and short of it, that figure of 50 million, I would imagine has just been magicked up out of thin air by someone. I can't imagine anyone at the club, or to be honest, most clubs ever putting a specific figure on things, because that's just generally what they wouldn't want to kind of tie themselves to that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's strange that it came from ESPN as well. It just seems a bit of a far-fetched outlet that is going to be associated with Liverpool, and they're the only one who knows that it's 50 million. And
they may well have picked it up from a smaller outlet, because the way everything works now, I wouldn't call it plagiarism, but everyone watches what everyone else is doing, and there's a lot of republishing that goes on. I think a lot of places, and I think certainly the Echo was going that way. When we do republish someone else's news, we will link it to them. I mean, transfer rumours have become like the meat and potatoes of daily content for many media organisations for quite a few years now, and particularly for an organisation like the Echo that obviously has a certain element of respect and kind of authority amongst supporters. You've got to be very careful, when you say this isn't the Echo saying it, it's ESPN or Football Insider or Sport Lens or whichever one of the millions of websites out there are churning out transfer news. And I'd say news, obviously, with the kind of inverted commas, because some of it is not really news, but stuff to fill content and spikes.
Yeah, absolutely. What about Genie? I mean, it was a bit of a mystery, isn't it? He's yet to actually say why he's left. I mean, we've discussed it, and Matty, you said about the contract length being offered at Liverpool wasn't what he wanted. For me, I say fair play to him really for joining PSG. I think there's probably, as silly as it sounds, less pressure at PSG than Barcelona, because he's more likely to win something. And let's not forget, Barcelona were, in the end, a little way off Atletico in La Liga. There is going to be pressure on him straight away to go in and make an impact and regain Messi that title. So yeah, thoughts on Genie leaving for PSG?
Brilliant. Yeah, all the best to it. I still can't understand these people on Twitter and all that. They call themselves Liverpool fans, and they're just like, he can, F off and all this stuff. I'm like, what? I mean, he's an amazing servant for Liverpool Football Club, and all we can do is say, good luck, and there you go, take care of your family. That's what he's doing.
He's absolutely a legend. I mean, he's 30, isn't he?
Yeah.
I think anyone, and I've seen some of the crap out there, what's he ever done and this, that. I think anyone that cannot appreciate what he's given to this Liverpool team and squad over the last 4 or 5 years has never watched him in the ground, certainly. And I would also venture doesn't really know much about football. Many of Liverpool's great sides have had a lot of unsung heroes, like Ronnie Whelan going back a few years ago. And I am disappointed to see him leave. And I'm a little surprised he's gone to PSG. On the face of it, you kind of think, oh, has he just gone for the money then? But looking at it maybe a bit wider, PSG are getting closer, aren't they? They are knocking on the door. I did see a report yesterday or today, but Pochettino, I think, from the sounds of it, is quite a big influential figure in that. And I can understand why he's going there on that basis. I think in a parallel universe, he'd have loved to have gone to Barcelona with Koeman there, but they do look a club in a bit of a mess at the moment, and I can kind of he'd be linked with Bayern Munich as well, I think, wasn't he? Which I kind of half expected him to end up there rather than Barcelona, to be honest. But if he's decided to go to PSG, then good luck to him. And I hope he does get the chance to come and play it. To get the kind of reception in front of. I know he got one in front of 10,000 in the last game against Palace, but I really hope he gets the chance to come back to Anfield and get the huge reception he deserves, because he is a 24-carat Liverpool legend in my eyes. One of the greats.
I think he might have spoke to Coutinho as well about his treatment of Barcelona and thought, what's the point in going there? If you don't like it, they just bin you off anyway. So at least he's going to PSG, get a few games. If he's getting a fat pay pack at his 30, he's going to be retired in 5 years. So
and from the sounds of it, Liverpool have underpaid him for quite a while as well. He has kind of alluded to the fact as well, hasn't he, that he might kind of give the full story. He's kind of hinted at that a couple of times in an interview recently. And I can't imagine he'll be the type to kind of really trash the club, and I hope he doesn't, but from the sounds of it, what you kind of allude, it sounds like contract length was the issue, and obviously Liverpool got a lot of players going into the 30s, so they obviously can't afford to have too many big earners at that end of the deal. But it is a shame, and I think it'll be a big miss for the next couple of seasons, I think, without a doubt.
Well, I've been go ahead, Sorry,
I was going to say, this was his original contract, from when we signed him from Newcastle. So he'd never signed an extension. He'd never signed new terms. So we're definitely underpaying him, considering how much he plays for us and considering how well he plays with us. I know that people nickname him Ghost and things like that. He does go missing on certain occasions, but who doesn't? People hail Bruno Fernandes, but I've never seen him play well in a big game. So, let's face it, Wijnaldum is a Liverpool legend, and I don't see why anyone would say otherwise.
Well,
there's no Madrid without Wijnaldum.
No. Yeah, exactly. Do you lads think Poch is staying there?
Yeah,
I think so now. Yeah, I think the fact that, obviously the reports that came out with Genie is that Poch was the one who persuaded him to go. I'd like to think it was that rather than the double money, but again, who can blame him? So it would be counterproductive now for Poch to leave. And again, without sounding, I don't know, too biased, I suppose, why would you leave PSG and Neymar and Wijnaldum and Mbappe for Spurs, who are in disarray?
True.
Unless Daniel Levy had something, because it looks like Harry Kane's off, and you kind of got the impression when Pochettino back to Spurs was put into the mix, it was almost possibly a leverage tactic to a desperate bid to get Kane to stay. But you kind of think if that was going to happen, it would have happened by now. There's already been talk since then of Spurs talking to and failing to land Antonio Conte as well. So it would, and also the way he was treated. One of my oldest mates is a big Spurs fan, and all right, they overperformed to get to Madrid and to do what they've done the last few years, but they were building something, and then to jib him off after what was it, October, November, for a slightly poor start, said everything, unfortunately, about a lot of the forces that seem to rule modern football. And and it's the Spurs supporters and the Spurs club ultimately that will pay the price for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as well, there isn't a plan anymore. Whereas under Pochettino, they were exciting. Tottenham, they were really good to watch. They were attacking. They were, relentless at times, and that's the reason why they got through Ajax, just purely because they attacked. And Lucas Moura had an absolute wonder. But then Mourinho came in, and that playbook went out the window. And that playbook didn't suit Harry Kane, Lucas Moura, Dele Alli, especially. Even Gareth Bale, who shone towards the end of the season. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Spurs, because a lot of people have rejected them. And I think that speaks volumes of the ownership.
I think it speaks volumes because they've got a decent fan base as well. I had a boss time in Madrid with loads of Spurs fans. It was belter.
Always been a sound club, Spurs. But the Seven Sisters Road in the 70s and 80s used to be a bit moody by all accounts, slightly before my time, but some of the stories I've heard from them. But no, I'd agree. Particularly after what we've seen, some of the, when there was 15,000 in Lisbon the other week, and City and Chelsea fans made a show of themselves. There was on a conservative estimate, 70 or 80,000 British football fans in Madrid, and not a blind bit of trouble. Before and afterwards, everyone got on great with each other, and I do feel for them because for them, particularly with the Super League business, for them to put themselves forward was laughable. And I think a lot of the Spurs fans could see that and cringe because of it, and despaired because the club just seems to be like Arsenal to a certain degree. They hung the hats on a new stadium being the panacea for everything, and that's not necessarily the case, isn't it? Arsenal haven't won a league since they've had theirs 15 years. They might have paid off the debt, but they're actually further away now than when they built it.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, which is why FSG extending the stadium as they are doing and planning to do further is obviously so much better than building a new one. And I completely back FSG on that. Absolutely, 100%.
It keeps the atmosphere as well, because it's a new stadium's nice, but it's impossible. Like there's certain blocks in Anfield which make the most noise. So trying to get that in a new stadium, it's too hard. It's like they just obviously got to put people wherever, and that's what kills atmosphere. If the Emirates is not unlike Highbury, not on at all like it, atmosphere wise.
Same with West Ham as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant example. Yeah. I mean, they've dodged a little bit. They've kind of they've had this great season under Moyes, but generally the sense of disquiet and dissent around that club has been very, very clear, palpable since they moved there. As I've always said, if the only thing FSG ever did for us was build us that main stand and keep us at Anfield, I'd have said thanks very much, because the thought of Liverpool, it's more than bricks and mortar. You know what I mean? That pitch, the number of people whose ashes have been scattered there, the memories that are housed there. It is Liverpool's USP in many ways. We all know how many games the ground and obviously the people within it have won on its own. So if all they'd ever done for us was keep us there, I'd have been grateful for that. And obviously they've done plenty more than that. Obviously primarily bringing in Jurgen Klopp, who's ushered in this fantastic golden era for us. That's not to say they haven't made some serious, massive mistakes, obviously. And I'm absolutely no fanboy of them whatsoever, and have been very critical of them at every step of the way, whether it's £77 tickets or trademarking the Liverbird, or obviously the Super League abomination. But it is encouraging that they do seem to be, even though they do keep making to some degree the same mistakes, which is frustrating, the fact that they are willing to engage with supporters. I sat in on the Spirit of Shankly open meeting last week, going into detail about they're literally willing to change the constitution of the club to give supporters a meaningful say. Now, obviously, until that's done, until that's watertight and made law, it's not over the line. But that to me shows that they are probably as good their owners as we could get at the moment. At the end of the day, the businessmen, they're there to make money. There's no point. If we want £75 million centre backs, then that comes with the territory. But they're not the Glazers. They're not sport washing oligarchs. And like I say, at the moment, I think they're as good as we're going to get.
Let's just go into detail about what you just said. Sorry, just about the Spirit of Shankly meeting. What was the main the concept there? Then what was the main aim of Spirit of Shankly and the owners? Well,
as I'm sure you're aware, they've released publicly the fact that they are the main recognised trust. They are an official supporters union that was it's been in business 2008, I think. So we're talking 13 years now. So on the back of obviously the whole fiasco of the aborted Super League that didn't even last 48 hours, they have had a number of meetings with the club now. The top table of the SOS. So this meeting basically was to go into some bit more detail about how things potentially would work going forward, the aims of what these talks are set out to achieve. I think the ultimate aim, and this has been ever since the union was launched, ultimately is supporter ownership. Now, the way the British society, the British game is structured, whether that's ever going to be like the Spanish model or even the German model, whether that's ever going to be possible, I don't know. But it was largely basically partly to lay out in a bit more detail how exactly things might work, and obviously nothing's set in stone yet. And also just to answer questions. There were hundreds and hundreds of questions that have been put in. They only had a limited amount of time. I think it only lasted an hour. But they've since released the full meeting on the website, and it's an ongoing process. You know what I mean? This is going to be. I think one of the interesting things was that, because I think was it possibly Spurs and Chelsea, since this whole thing happened, have announced that basically they've been given 2 seats on the board, And everyone was like, oh, well, that's ultimately what you want. But they actually explained quite well that in reality, that isn't the best case scenario, because once you're part of the board, you're limited by things like, certain things you disclose, certain things you can't say. Having some kind of distance means that, they're part of the conversation, but they're not absolutely locked into it. So they still have that freedom to dissent and to veto things and to not be dragged along. So, for the full SP, I would recommend everyone go onto the Spirit of Shankly website, join the union if you can. There's power, without getting political, there's power in togetherness. Our club, our city is built on that. And, it's only because of supporter power, people power, that this thing collapsed on its arse within 48 hours. The arrogance of all the people at the top of it thought they could railroad it through, but they obviously didn't reckon on not just Liverpool supporters, but football supporters across the world saying, no, this is our game, we will not allow it. And it's important that momentum is maintained, I think.
I think it's good as well what Spirit of Shankly are doing, because although Chelsea and Tottenham are given 1 or 2 seats to fans on the board, how many other board members are there who will be together, who could just outvote them straight away anyway?
Exactly.
That's really interesting. Thank you for that. Just going back to what you said then about how transfers work in terms of the media. Obviously, social media has, basically destroyed all print media. Could you give any information about, what to report on or what the club, presents to you or any information really about targets or anything transfer related?
Well, I mean, what you said there, social media has killed the print media. It hasn't yet. I hope it won't, but I do fear it is a kind of inexorable process that ultimately will happen. And there may be no such things as hard copy newspapers in 5, 10, 15, 20 years time. I hope not, because that's what I was brought up on. Even though in my 18 years at the Echo, from day one, I was part of the digital team. I was part of that kind of process of that integration, really, of going from one to the other. But I do still believe it in print media. But obviously, because it's an existential crisis that print media faces. Essentially everything is given away for free online. Now, what business can possibly hope to survive if it's giving away its product for nothing? Now, the basic funding model of certainly local media has always been advertising anyway. So obviously, the only way it survives is by online advertising, and the only way you bring online advertising in is obviously to say, well, it is to show the reach that you can give advertisers their products. And that informs the kind of the mentality so much that the Echo's parent company, Trinity Mirror, actually changed the name, which is I think certainly one of the biggest media groups in Europe. I think the second biggest in Europe, behind Kirch in Germany. Certainly that was the case a few years ago. They actually changed the name a few years ago to Reach PLC, which shows how much of a shift it's been. And so that's why everything is informed by analytics. Everything is informed by numbers. And in a news sense, the things that do best are hard crime and showbiz. And in a sporting sense, football sense, the things that do best are transfers. Mm-hmm. So that's why, certainly for a lot of certainly established print titles, transfer news now plays an absolutely fundamental part of how people work on a day-to-day basis. But it does come with problems because, like I say, in the past, I think the Echo would always take some care to not go in for too much gossip, too much rumor, because to kind of maintain that reputation, that authority that had been built up obviously for decades and decades and decades. However, those kind of standards have had to be lowered because of the bottom line. Because unfortunately, people, there've been, in my 18 years there, I think there was probably close to 10 times that job cuts were announced, because it is unfortunately, sadly, a declining industry. So pushing transfer stuff ultimately is something that the Echo always seeks to do. Any media organisation, including the Echo, has to make certainly a big part of what they do. In terms of how the club work, like you say, the whole landscape has shifted because they want to report things on their terms. So I think they will sometimes. You'll often see the phrase "the Echo understands," and when you see that, that will mean that something has been put to a press officer, and he's come back and said, "Well, there might be something in it." But I think they'll very rarely go into a lot of detail or really stand things up to a great extent, because ultimately they want to break it on their own sites. They don't want to be scooped on their own story, because ultimately we are competitors now within the media landscape. But I think there is an appreciation that ultimately still say we, even though I've left 3 months ago. I'm very proud to work for the Echo for so long and always be a part of me. There is no association that the lads at the Echo and the lasses at the Echo have a job to do, and ultimately it's kind of like a working relationship between the two, but very much with both sides and the knowledge now that it's the Echo, it's the club that calls the tune.
Absolutely. I mean, the one that stuck out for me really, because I just always read the Echo for everything at Liverpool, was the Fabinho deal, because that was just a shot out of nowhere. That was like done, sealed, delivered in like 2 hours, and God knows how long that had been going on for. And even this summer, to be fair, with Diogo Jota, nobody saw that come in, so it just seems that, I don't know. I don't know whether the club are, like you've said, like trying to keep things for themselves and going, hey, surprise, because nobody knew, it seemed to me anyway, no one knew about Fabinho, and certainly no one knew about Jota.
I think with Fabinho was proper old school, wasn't it? And Diogo Jota, back from the days where I was a kid, when it would just be presented as a fait accompli. So
it was class, to be fair. It was absolutely brilliant. I loved it.
Well, and particularly with Fabinho as well, it was literally 24, 48 hours after the defeat in Kiev, which I still maintain was I had a phenomenal day in Kiev. Obviously, the match was disappointing, but obviously everything that's happened since paints Kiev in a certain light. And when I hear the word Kiev, I have generally fond memories. But obviously, you'd lost the final. There was a doubt, are we just, is this one of our crests and falls that we've had for the last 20 odd years? And literally for that, I think it was the bank. I was actually in work on the bank holiday. You wouldn't be feeling a bit glum, a bit hungover. It was my birthday the day before. So if we'd won in Kiev, the homecoming parade would have been on my birthday. So that was another reason I was a bit gutted. I was obviously very gutted that we lost. And it just gave everybody a massive lift, didn't it? I think what that also kind of illustrated as well is the way Liverpool's transfers work now, with the likes of Michael Edwards and Michael Gordon, and the work that they do behind the scenes. I imagine Jota was the same. Jota was the day after Thiago, wasn't it? Which was, it was very much kind of like chalk and cheese, because Thiago was very much a modern transfer saga that was played out every day in the media for 3 months and finally got over the line, death by 1,000 cuts. And then literally Jota out of nowhere, and within like probably 3 or 4 hours of the first rumours, it was basically done, wasn't it? But I think that generally you get the impression that's how Liverpool like to do business. I hope they'll have learned their lessons from this year. Generally, it is all about planning and forward thinking, and thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead of the other club. However, you do sometimes have to react to things. I think to a certain degree, the Thiago signing was proof of that they will occasionally break their kind of principles. Because obviously signing a 29-year-old, all right, it was free, but I'm sure he's on an enormous contract. And obviously they took a gamble with the defenders in the summer, didn't they? And it massively bit them in the arse. They didn't replace Lovren. They gambled on having 2 out of the 3 main centre halves, Gomez and Matip, who were chronically injury prone. And then they also dropped a bollock, in my opinion, in January. If they decided the 2 lads that were brought in should have been brought in at the start, and ultimately that's probably what cost us any realistic chance of keeping pace with City. But no one's perfect. Obviously, we're living in a pandemic, which has obviously changed the entire financial landscape for them as well. And generally, they've more often than not shown signs of learning from mistakes. So hopefully, this summer we'll see proof of that. Well, obviously, it's not made easier by the fact that there's a tournament going on, which a lot of the key people they might be looking at will be involved in that now.
Do you have any favourite moments in the Echo then, while you were there?
Well, I think in terms of like most significant moment, it would have to be related to Hillsborough, because that's certainly over the last kind of 7 or 8 years. That's where the bulk of I only worked on Echo Sport for the last 18 months. I was generally part of the digital team and then the news team. So I'd say the combination of when the independent panel report came out in 2012, and then obviously the inquest verdict in 2016. That's in a footballing sense. I only ever covered maybe 20 games ever live from the ground, but the first one was the Champions League game against Real Madrid when Benayoun scored the header, and so that was only 20 odd games, but a couple of cup finals, semi-finals, few derbies. But I think the Benayoun header was tough to beat, particularly because the afternoon all of a sudden was taken up with work asking me to go and do vox pops with people because supposedly Rafa Benitez was about to quit. It was such a mad time terms of the life of the club, and such a waste because I'm sure plenty of people feel the same. There's always that what if feeling about Rafa. If he'd had more stable ownership behind him, what might he have won? We'll never know, will we? But
when you said about Hillsborough, what was it like writing about that, knowing so many people were waiting for you basically to be talking about it so they could get the updates? What was it like being a part of it? Like, was it more emotional than a sense of pride of reporting it, or?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't at Hillsborough, but I was 11, nearly 12 when it happened already, like an obsessive, fanatic Liverpool supporter. So I remember every detail about the day. My dad, who's gone now, he was dialed Evertonian. Obviously, Everton win the other semi-final. Growing up, I lived away from Liverpool quite a while, studied in Bristol, lived in London for a while. So obviously was very much aware about how the rest of the country perceived Hillsborough and perceived Liverpool because of that. And then my involvement really came about 2007-8, just around about the time when I was I had to basically train, even though I was always a digital journalist, there was no digital qualification, so I had to train as a print reporter, even though that's never what it was or never what I wanted to be, but I basically had to jump through those hoops to get paid a proper wage, basically. And I got introduced to the lady called Anne Williams, who was one of the main campaigners, who at the time had just started her own charity. And I got to know Anne a bit more and became involved in that, and ended up writing, had the great honour of helping a daughter write a second book for her. And the first service I was actually sent to cover, I was very fortunate in that I basically got involved in it professionally just at the time everything started to change. The first anniversary service I covered was the 20th in 2009 when Andy Burnham got heckled with Justice for 96 on the cop. And that obviously set in motion the formation of the independent panel, which led to the quashing of the inquest and the inquest and everything that's followed. And it's been the most meaningful experience of my life. I'm very fortunate to have made some very, very strong alliances and friendships with some of the incredible people, families and survivors who've been affected by Hillsborough. And, I feel incredibly blessed to know them and to call some of them my friends. And I'm just in awe of them, to be honest, that these people who've been treated so appallingly and treated so shabbily would have every reason to harden their hearts against the world. And most of them have still got this kind of essential goodness and optimism and hope about them, which I think is a message for anybody. It certainly has helped me during difficult times in my life, which I've had plenty of. And I think, well, if these aren't feeling sorry for themselves and getting on with things, then what issues have I got? Do you know what I mean? So that's how I look at it.
That's amazing. To be fair, to be part of that and to have that philosophy as well is quite supreme.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll be aware of what's happened in the last couple of weeks. The shambolic prosecutions, which ended in the collapse of the sham trial in Salford, and it's another kick in the face for everybody who's been affected: the families, the survivors, the good people of Liverpool, the Liverpool supporters, who who some of whom wouldn't even have been born when it happened, that they've basically had to carry the weight and be looked at in a certain way because of what's happened. Unfortunately, it says a lot about the corrupt nature of the British establishment, that what's happened has happened, but it hasn't broken people's spirit, and there's still, the thing people have got their hearts on now is to try and at least introduce what they're calling the Hillsborough law, which will at least make it a criminal offence for public officials not to tell the truth, to withhold information. I mean, it's a damning indictment of the standards of public life that it should even have to be a thing. You know what I mean? In our grandparents' generations, it would. I'm not saying listen, there've always been baddies, but I think in general, in the past, people in public office had a sense of duty and did the right thing. And unfortunately, now we live in a fairly amoral society, don't we? But this is something that hopefully is tangible, is real, is something that people will push for. And they've been able to suppress the truth in the courts, and unfortunately, there's nothing with the judicial system. There's nothing we can use to change that. But they can't silence people telling the truth, and that's why things like, well, I'm not speaking out of turn here. The book that I had the great pleasure in helping Anne's daughter Sarah write has been dramatised into a four-part drama for ITV, which was filmed 2.5 years ago and is basically going to be shown towards the end of this year. I'm sure there's going to be other TV programmes, documentaries, books. They can shut us up in the courts, but they can't shut us up in the wide world. And it's important that it's passed down from generation to generation, because they'll, the really damaging, dangerous thing about this ruling the other week was that, it fell down on this technicality that it was a public inquiry. Now, obviously, COVID is something that's affected the world. A cousin of mine, we share one grandmother. His other grandmother, sadly, was taken by COVID in a care home very early on in the pandemic. He's become involved in this COVID Families for Justice now. And they're very much pushing for, the government obviously are trying to kick this inquiry into the long grass, cover it up as much as they can. Hillsborough law isn't just important to football fans or Liverpool fans. It's important to everybody, because if they can suppress the truth over Hillsborough, they're already doing it over the pandemic on both sides of the Atlantic. I don't think that, certainly when Donald Trump was in power, I don't think that's any secret. I'm sorry if I've just alienated some of your audience there, but truth is all we have, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? At the end of the day, if we haven't got truth, what have we got? And I think that's something that anybody that believes in what's right and wrong needs to take a side on.
It's remarkable that you've done a book on Anna Williams, and the fact it's being turned into a TV series. It'll be amazing, because she's a true legend for that cause, and a true legend in this city, definitely.
She is. I mean, sadly, there's many family members and survivors, like Anne, who didn't live to even see the inquest verdict, let alone what's happened since. And Anne and her family would be the first people to say that. But yeah, she's a truly inspirational figure in a city amongst them. And I think Anne said it many times, that she couldn't have done what she'd done without the support of the average Joe, the average footy fan. Kids who weren't even at Hillsborough but have grown up with these stories, and you've seen how I read a brilliant phrase the other day that someone said, Hillsborough didn't just happen 32 years ago; it's been happening for 32 years. And I thought that summed it up absolutely brilliantly, and that's why the world's changed in the last 18 months, hasn't it? And I think there's an opportunity for all of us to try and create some kind of better world for our kids, for our friends' kids to live in. And we've all got to try and do that, but it won't be easy. But the best things in life never are they? I've rattled on a bit there. Sorry.
Oh, no. Well, it's something very dear to all our hearts. But picking up on that, I talked to Tony Evans a couple of days ago, and he has been getting so much bad crap on Twitter. People throwing like horrible words at him because, when he wrote about it, obviously he worked.
Superb piece. I read it the other day.
But people associated it because of Murdoch, and the rag that we all won't name. So they associated him with it.
Well, he was football editor at the Times, wasn't he? And that's something that you can look at it for two ways. Some people, in some people's eyes, he's taken Murdoch's shilling, and that's the end of the story for it. And if that's how people want to feel, then you have to respect that. I think the way he's always pitched it is that he was looking at, he wasn't, I'll try and phrase this delicately, for rather than being from outside the tent peeing in, be inside the tent peeing out. And to try and influence things from a certain way. And at the end of the day, I don't know how long he was there. He's not there anymore. Mm-hmm. But even when he was there, before, after, and since, he's always spoken the truth. And I think spoken it in ways as well that people can understand. Paint it in pictures that put it in terms. Particularly, obviously, because some of the things to do with Hillsborough are very technical, very legal. Another, he's not a Liverpool man, but someone that deserves mention when you're talking about people's professional involvement in Hillsborough is David Conn, who works for The Guardian, who's been someone that's written and campaigned about Hillsborough for many, many years, starting from the 90s, long before everybody else came to the party, if you like. And he's again someone with this great ability to simplify things. A couple of times I'd be sitting in court thinking, how the hell do I tweet that? And I'd see what David is tweeting. I think that's how you do it. So there's a lot of good people in all walks of life, politicians, just ordinary people on the street who've supported people, whether it's friends, family members, survivors who've been going through stuff. It's often been said, hasn't it, that they picked on the wrong city. And I don't know if there's many other cities that could have, I don't want to say come through Hillsborough, because it's devastated, it's destroyed too many lives. 96 people died that day, but we'll never know the true number because there's been suicides, lives destroyed by drink, drugs, marriages broken down, and it's still happening. And unfortunately, what's happened in the recent weeks, and obviously the way it's been painted in the media by some sections of the media, has reinforced that and has opened wounds up again for people. And that's why it's really important that we all shout from the rooftops and say, no, this is not how it was. This is not how it is. We will not allow this to be the dominant narrative.
That's awesome. I mean, again, it's just so insightful to hear. We all know what happened, and we can read so much about it, but to actually hear from someone who's been involved in it all is quite frankly inspirational as well. So thank you for that.
No, thanks for giving me the platform, because it's like I say, this is something that goes beyond football. This is something that can affect all of us in our lives. There are, I don't want to get political about it, but the way things have changed in the last few years, there's an us and them at the moment. And ultimately, people need to come together for the greater good. Some people don't believe in a greater good, and somehow they have to be educated. Some people believe there has to be an us and them. I don't see the world that way. I think there's a lot of other good people that don't see the world that way. And it needs a bigger brain than mine to somehow sell that idea to the other lot. So if anyone's got any ideas out there, good luck.
Amazing. Well, before we get on to anything else, we are going to do this over a 2-parter. So that is it for part 1. We will be releasing part 2, obviously, later on with Dan and with Daz, Matty and myself later on this week. But for now, we're going to sign off, and that is the end of part 1. So thank you, everyone, for listening. And I mean, for me, it's been really intriguing. It's been inspirational, and it's just been generally interesting, really, to hear Dan's point of view, as well as obviously Daz and Matty's as well. So thank you so much for that.
Thanks.
And we're going to get onto transfers, and we're going to get onto more questions for Dan. So please do stay tuned for part 2, which is going to come out later on in the week. But from me, from Daz, from Dan and Matty, for now, it's goodbye.